On. We have organised here 3 events in a little series around institutionalising respect. We know respect is a really important theme personally. We know it's really important organisationally. And so we think we've something to say which at the very least will be a thought provocation for you all. The 3 events we've planned, today's the first, 8th of April, well done, you're here. Same time next week when we're going to go a little deeper into one dimension of respect, and then similarly on the 5th of May when we go a little deeper still. And because sometimes respect is a concept which is difficult to ground, we've dug around, Sonja and I, for some what we think are some good everyday examples of respect. And we're going to kick off just by sharing those with you. So over to you, Sonja.
Yes, so we're starting off with a lovely little snippet we found on the BBC website during the US election. So a supporter of Donald Trump in Wisconsin, USA, had noticed that his neighbor, who was a supporter of the rival Democrats, the Biden and Harris, he had a sign up, but that had been removed. So the Trump supporter went and put the Biden and Harris sign up again. This shows one of the key characteristics of respect. Respect is fairness.
And so it was really interesting. I saw the original TV clip of that, and it was really gratifying, actually. There was an element of open-mindedness about the positioning, what was contextually a really difficult situation. Everybody's favorite, well, almost everybody's favorite, Jacinta Ardern, who's probably become one of the most well-known politicians globally in recent years, did something which I actually thought was quite truly remarkable, which was having won a landslide election in which she was able to form a majority government without any opposition. She decided to form a coalition government, specifically for the purpose of making sure that all of the voices across society were adequately represented. And I think this is a very, very important and gracious step forward, not something that would typically characterize people who play political roles in society. A deeply respectful statement, not just a gesture, but a deeply respectful statement of intent about how society is to be run. So that was our second example. We get very excited about these examples, and this is also, I think, a third one, another really important example, Sonja.
Yes, Dan, and this is an example I particularly like. So still, we live in a society where maltreatment or abuse of women is a factor that happens. And in a lot of cases, women will have to prove the ordeal they've gone through. They aren't being met with open ears necessarily. So this is the story of a female police officer in Detroit who consciously takes a position of trusting and believing the story the women tell about the ordeal they went through, about the abuse or the maltreatment. So this for me shows another key characteristic of respect, which is trust. And I believe, Kevin, you've got some more background around this. Doesn't this lead to more convictions?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this approach is it has, for those people who are concerned about, the appropriateness of law and order, taking this position actually does 2 things. It ferrets out anybody who may be making false accusations more clearly. Of course, that's a dangerous thing to do. But equally, it leads to better conviction rates. So really, really interesting. The final example we have, and we're going to invite you to give us some examples in a second. The final example is this is an example from a climate assembly in the UK. Now, the climate assembly is a form of what's called deliberative democracy. It's a bit like a jury system. You have a difficult policy issue, you invite people from all walks of life to come together to consider, debate, discuss, to be informed about the particular issue. And the group, over a number of sessions, forms a policy position on which it can advise government. The UK, Ireland, the Netherlands are countries that I know of that have experimented with this process. It's a deeply respectful process because it listens to what people have to say. It seeks to understand people's perspective, and it seeks to reach positions which, even if not everybody agrees with, at least everybody can understand and accept because of the conversation and the reasoning that they have gone through to get to that point. Okay. So for examples, there may be many. These have touched us because they're saying something important about respect. We've deliberately not tried to define respect for you. We haven't said respect means these things, because actually there is some subjectivity in this. But we are interested to hear what you have to say. What do you think respect is about? And the two questions we have for you are these: what's missing from these examples that you might have expected to hear in a conversation about respect? But actually, what also do you like about the examples that we've offered? What has resonated with you? So we'll give you a minute or two. Maybe you'd like to fill the chat box with some of your thoughts, and we'll invite you to talk about one or two of them. We've spelt Jacinda incorrectly, or at least I have, so thank you for the correction, Daniel.
Anyone, any examples of respect that you want to share?
It usually takes a second or two for the ideas to come through chat. Okay, we have, at the moment, we don't have any thoughts from, first one coming through, great. So I'm going to come to you, Daniel, in a second, unless we get some more. Great. Neil, thank you. I think there's always a little delay on chat, I've noticed, between people inputting their thoughts and them coming through on the screen. So now we have a complete flourish of things coming through. So actually, because Daniel, you've contributed at least twice so far today. So you were saying respect of various religious beliefs, Daniel. Just maybe you'd like to say a word or two about that?
Yes. In certain countries or in certain regions, people hold very strong religious beliefs. And it is because of intolerance from various factions or sectors that people hold so strongly, they're not willing to listen to another party, that it causes not only interactions that escalate to become tensions of war and destruction. It is also places in which people do not try to take the view of the other to see how can we work collaboratively together. Now, in Singapore, we have been very fortunate in that the government in Singapore has actively discouraged any of such views. People still do have certain views like that. But in Singapore, it is one of the few countries around the world where you can find a Muslim mosque, a Hindu temple, a Chinese temple, and a church, all within a radius of about maybe 400 or 500 meters together. Whereas in a place like India, for example, you may have a Muslim community destroying a Hindu temple and building a Muslim mosque on top of the previous site of the Hindu temple. So respect is important in that context, that if we don't hear others' views, if we don't respect and give others the space to practice what they believe, it can escalate very quickly to a very undesirable outcome.
That's Beautifully articulated, Daniel. I think were it not for the fact that Sonja and I are on a mission in this particular session, we could spend a long time picking up from the input you just made and discussing that in some depth. So thank you very much for that contribution. I'd like to maybe just hear from one other person for a moment, perhaps something that might lead us a little more into the organizational dimensions of respect. But I say this with a degree of reluctance because it would be really fascinating to stay with Daniel's introduction to this theme. Mr. Gruber has said something about respect as a key factor in leadership in any business. So Mr. Gruber, would you like to elaborate on your thoughts here? So yeah, we've heard from Daniel this, you know, very large, all-embracing view about what respect is at a societal and religious level. Now we come down to somebody running an organization, somebody leading an organization. How do we make that journey? How do we make that link?
Kevin, thank you very much. And sorry, my display is A group. My name is Armin, and I still failed to set this correctly. It shows Armin. It's a user problem. Apologies. I'd like to pick up the point on religious tolerance, actually, particularly also in a business context. And I have long-term experience of cooperation of let's say a small Bavarian-based, German-based company that also operates a manufacturing facility in Malaysia. I spent a lot of time myself in the Malacca area. And to me, it was just a textbook experience to see how tolerant actually the people working in the Malaysian factory worked together. But I also experienced this as a very, very positive thing, how the Bavarian guys, basically all being Christians, drove their colleagues to the mosque on a Friday, picked them up, and 1.5 hours later, and they had a joint evening meal. And let's say this Malaysian spirit experienced in Malaysia originally transferred to the German people who are not known for being the most tolerant one. And it has a very, very positive effect on the business cooperation, of course, and on the dealing with customers, and on training others on how to have that cultural tolerance established in a business, because it's absolutely essential. There's so much damage done when cultural or religious backgrounds come into it that lead to hidden agenda or fight or just damage outcomes that could be much better if people were on the same hymn sheet here. And in that sense, yes, very, very important factor.
I think respect of any aspect of difference is important in the business environment. So I think this is a really great example, whether that's the culture, whether that's the religious background, whether that's simply respecting others' different views, which is something we've picked up in the chats as well. So another great example. Thank you, Armin. But the point that we're really interested in as part of this webinar is, you know, I think everybody in the session agrees respect is important. Respect is absolutely critical for us as humans to collaborate and achieve together. But how do we do that? How, as an organization, do we create an environment of respect? And we've designed a little model around that. So we're looking at two axes, from forming to established policy, and from forming to person-centric conversation. So let me give you an example. An organization might have a great payroll policy, but there's a massive gender pay gap that nobody talks about. Equally, you might have great conversation in your organization, but you never get paid on time or the right amount. So these two factors, if they are misaligned, they are creating an environment of lacking respect. Whereas as an organization focuses on developing both policy and conversation, we come from a deficit zone into a sort of what we have coined here, the polite zone, where you have some emerging and increased focus on conversation to the respectful zone, where policies are lived. There aren't something that sits in the drawer and is never touched again, but there's a real focus on the people in the organization as well. So you can then break these up into a wide range of clusters. As an example, if you look at number 1 here in the upper left corner, you can have an organization that has fantastic policies that are really well developed and reviewed, but there is no focus on actually bringing this policy to the people and making it live. So you have a compliant but soulless organization. Whereas equally, you know, and I'm coming back to my payroll example, you can have an organization that can have a fantastic culture, agile performance management processes, great meetings, great improvement, but the team don't get paid on time because there's a lack of focus on policy. And I think probably the space that most of us who have worked in the corporate environment will know is the what we coined the utterly polite zone, the number 8. There's some policy that exists, but it doesn't get reviewed all the time. It doesn't necessarily filter into every process and the way we make our work. And equally, meetings do take place and they're fantastic in the meeting room or around the whiteboard, but then communication breaks down as soon as you leave the structure of the meeting. So what we're interested in, as a little next step, we want to keep this as conversational as possible. We want to see where you think you are. So we're gonna put you into breakout sessions. Please, before you go, take a screenshot or take a picture of the model. We do not expect you to have fully internalized the model just yet. Maybe later. And have a conversation about where do you think your organization is at this point on this model, on this range journey to total respect, and why is that? And then after sort of 5 minutes, we come back together. We'd like a speaker from some of the groups or every group if we manage to share a little bit of your thinking, and we're going to explore the different corners of the cluster further with you then.
Just as we're preparing for that, I think Malika will probably divide you into about 3 or 4 groups. Malika, you make a judgment about what do you think is the right number. Just as Malika's doing that, I just want to acknowledge very quickly the range of other thoughts that came through on chat. If we get a little bit of time at the end of the session, I may pick a few more up. We touched on only 2. I've got at the end of the day here, you know, 15 or so really thoughtful suggestions about the response to the first exercise we did here. So thank you very much for that. So Malika, if you're ready and you're able to whiz people off into their little syndicate groups, that would be great. It looks like everybody's back. So
and you're mute, Kevin.
Yeah, I've got it. It doesn't seem to, we've been playing around now with Zoom. I'm sure it's true for the rest of you for over a year, but yeah, there's almost never a meeting I'm in when somebody fails to say, hey, you're muted, you know, and you just can't quite get over that hurdle. So you've had a very short period of time, we realize, to start to explore a very, very big and arguably complex area. So we're trying to, you know, we're dumbing this down. We're taking it from the big themes around religious tolerance and diversity into something which is anchored in organizational life. That's the idea here. I hope you've had some interesting conversations. We'd like just to hear a little bit from one or two of you. Perhaps a few of you were able to say, hey, do you know what? My organization is the chaotic organization, or my organization is the tick box exercise organization. Who would like to say a little about where they felt their organization ended up in the model? We'd love to have a volunteer.
I don't mind starting.
So Maria, love to hear from you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I'll summarize what came out of our brief discussion.
Lovely.
It touched on two areas. Louise brought up the great point about her experiences being quite varied. But typically it had gravitated into the polite zone. So you had a lot of managers who were reluctant or unable to confront issues that really needed to be dealt with, which were impacting the organization. And as a result, things sort of spiraled into an area where it really wasn't workable. So on the face of it, it's polite, but underneath not dealing with issues, not committed to confronting issues. Louise, I hope I captured that accurately. And then from my side, I picked up on that and said that my experience also was different organizations, which, like Louise mentioned, which were both good and bad. But my experience had gravitated very much into, on paper, in policy. The optics were great, but in terms of the lived experience of the employees, it was something actually quite different, which resulted in resentment, disengagement from employees, and generally an atmosphere which is not conducive for a positive working experience or productive. So those were the sort of things that we captured. I guess it was a combination of polite zone and respectful zone, but respectful in terms of optics, but not actually what was integrated into the fabric of the organization. So I hope that captures our group well.
That's beautifully expressed. Thank you for summarizing that so well on behalf of your group. Sonja, I could tell you were itching. I could tell you were itching to come in on a couple of points there. So I'll give way to you here.
It's the types of organizations where everything, like you say, looks good on paper, and then you go out of the meeting room and then your email inbox explodes with tons of escalations and unnecessary backwards and forwards because the conversation just isn't good enough to really resolve the issues. So I recognize that from my previous career in corporate quite a lot.
And it's very interesting. The notion of politeness is psychologically a very loaded notion. I mean, on the one hand, there is nothing wrong with being polite to people, but it's easily confused with respect, and it's not the same as respect. And sometimes politeness can be a defense. You know, my failure to engage in what Maria was talking about as the critical conversation can be avoided because I can just operate with a veneer of politeness. Sometimes we don't need politeness. Sometimes we need really robust conversation around difficult or tricky issues. Now so we can be actually impolite, but respectful. Okay, the respect is going to the place to have the conversation that's needed to be had. So some great examples there, and I'm just going to have to hold myself back because it just makes me want to talk for about 3 days and expand the topic. But it'd be great to hear from somebody else, from one of the other groups as well.
Wouldn't it make sense to maybe share the follow-up slides that we would have on a for example, number 4 or number 8? So we relate it to the examples.
Okay, let's do that, and then we'll take a different view. So. We did a little bit of thinking here. Thank you for that, Sonja. We did a little bit of thinking, and now Kevin has to do a little bit of organizing. Here we are. So we did a little bit of thinking about, well, what would it mean if you ended up with a view that said, actually, my organization is an utterly polite organization. That's where we are. We sort of it's not a bad place to be. We've got reasonably well elaborated policies. We can talk to each other. We are very polite with each other. We say good morning. When we work around the tiered meeting structure and the whiteboard, we have very focused conversations. But perhaps outside of that, we don't get to the nitty-gritty things that needs to be impacted. Then what do? And our view would be, at the highest level, we do two things. We might look at the policy dimension and select those policies which will have priority of priority importance for the organization, and focus on developing those. And secondly, we might simultaneously enhance our ability to hold more skillful dialogue with people, perhaps enhancing the coaching capability of people in the business, so that we're attending much more directly to the real needs that people have as part of their life in organizations. And maybe there's a congruence between those two things. Maybe the policies that we undertake to give priority to are also a reflection of the fact that we need to improve the quality or the skill base of dialogue inside the organization. Again, we could go on at length, but just as a highlight for that. We will make sure you have these slides available to you, so you can look through them after the event and write back to us and tell us how we've got it wrong and how we've missed so many angles. We'd love to hear from you on that. But perhaps there's somebody else who'd like to take a minute or two, and I'm also conscious of time. We promised this would be a short event, so let's just hear from one other person. For those of you who are shy, I have what's called the finger of destiny, and it ranges across the screen and it lands at a point, and then before you know it, you're selected. So the case is, does somebody want to be brave? Are you going to submit yourself to the finger of destiny?
Okay, then I'll speak up on group 2 on behalf of group 2 before the finger points at us.
Hein, are you able to just put on your video? Is that okay for you? So
that is okay for me, obviously.
Lovely.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Basically, we had the input from two persons. We had the input from Chang, who elaborated about his experience where people were really polite, but apart from that, it was the culture which was predefined by the company. But at the end, everybody was working for themselves. So that was typically a level 2 organization. And I shared a bit of the background in the current company where I'm working in. I have the feeling that we all have it established. So there are modus, there are predefined meetings where people can speak up, etc. But then when you go out and you have your fully loaded email box, as already explained by Sonja, and people all over forgotten how this really shall work. And also what you see is that in the official meetings, the mentioned standards are fully deployed, but when informal meetings, etc., that's all forgotten. So therefore, I rate that at the level 1 at the moment.
At the level 1, so this is just if I check my understanding of what you mean here. So by level 1, do you mean number 1 in our classification?
Your classification, yes. So at the top left corner.
Top left corner. And so just give us, what's it like to be in that place then, Hein?
Now, I came from a company where we were a bit, let's say, in the 5, 7, in the bottom left corner, so to say. So this is already quite a relief to be in a company which is graded at 1. And I'm trying together with others to move a bit more to the right when we are looking at the model.
So you've been on a journey, if I hear it correctly, from an organization which was bottom left to an organization that's top left. So this is, from your personal experience, definitely an improvement in life, presumably.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, and you'd rather be where you are than where you were.
Yes.
But what's missing is the side that is most concerned with conversation, with interaction, with skillful dialogue between people.
Yeah, sometimes I have the feeling of keeping up appearances.
Okay, and I think that's a great phrase. Sometimes I have the feeling of keeping up with appearances. That's right. So we're not quite getting to truthful, respectful interaction. There's something here about the avoidance avoiding difficulties, avoiding the gist of what things happen to be about. Okay, really interesting. Sonja, anything you would like to add at this point?
And maybe if we share the slides that links to it. So if you were to move this organization into a more respectful zone, the core thing that you want to do is you want to build the skills of social interaction. So really focus on the quality of your conversation within your leadership and in the wider organization, but also establish clarity on values. Yeah. Where do we want to go with these policies? What is the type of organization that we want to live moving forward?
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to be respectful of people's time here, although I would rather carry on for the next couple of hours, as I've said several times. We promised a short event followed by 2 further short events. So I'm going to remind you of where we are and what's coming next. If you are able to join us again next week, this time next week, we're going to go deeper. Rather than having to listen to just Sonja and I, we're going to invite a friend of ours, Lee Roethenbaugh, who's a chartered psychotherapist. And he's going to take us into an area where we talk about the sorts of things that are highlighted on the screen here. So we're going to talk about authentic dialogue, about politeness as defense, which is something that I've mentioned, about unconditional positive regard, about respecting ourselves. There's an important theme of research that says actually it's very difficult to offer respect to others until we've learned to respect ourselves. How do we do that? Okay, so next week we're going to go deeper. Lee is much more interesting than me, certainly, possibly even more interesting than Sonja. I don't know. You'll have to tell us whether that's true or not. And then Sonja, a couple of weeks beyond that.
Yes, we're bringing in Helen Rhodes. Helen Rhodes is a senior HR leader. You name it, she's worked there. And Helen is going to talk to us about the importance of policy being a living, breathing organism that informs the processes, that inform the culture. And how do you actually make diversity and inclusion something that happens all across the organization and is a lived being? How important is it to have the right compensation and benefit policies, focus on well-being, focus on sustainability, but not just as a tick box exercise, but as something that informs the values of the organization, and then through conversation creates a really respectful environment. And Helen has a fantastic case study from her history where she can talk us through. So I'm really excited about hearing from her on this one.
Okay, fantastic. So two points of reminder. If you want to find out a little bit more between this event and next week event, then please go to the Soundwave website, where you can download our white paper talking about respect, and a reminder that you've now successfully completed the first stage of your degree in this work around respect. You've attended our session today. Next one is on the 15th, same time next week, and then we have a little gap until the 5th of May, when we hope you'll be able to join us also. Formally, I will end the event for this morning, but I think Sonja and I are both available to stay online for a little longer. For those of you who have some time and you have some questions or you have some comments, we're happy to stay here for the next 10 to 15 minutes and continue our conversation. But formally speaking, we'll end the event, and we'll end the recording as well, Malika, at this point as well. So people are now free to really tell us what they think about what they've been doing for the last half an hour or so. So for me, thank you for your attendance and participation.
Same for me, thank you. It was really great to hear your perspectives, so I really enjoyed that.
Thanks very much.